Hello, this is Wendy Dumaresq from Natural Woman Network Thrive Through Menopause course. Today I'm really fortunate to be speaking with Scarlett Vespa from Mrs. V Society. Welcome, Scarlett.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
And it's so great. Scarlett's in Sydney and she has a following of women and men, especially over 40, all around the world. So Scarlett's in a very good position to speak about things premenopausal right through. So today it's all about you, Scarlett.
Oh, it's all about me. Oh my goodness.
It's all about you. Now, last year we started a conversation about menopause when we were doing an interview for your work. So we'd love to continue that a bit. And can you tell me a little bit about what you understand historically about the menopausal transition?
Well, funnily enough, when we've been talking before, and I didn't think I was a candidate because I went, oh, I still get my period, so I mustn't be experiencing menopause. And then you very quickly said, well, actually it starts before then. I went, oh, I didn't know that. So in itself, just that conversation has opened me up to the fact that there are changes. And I know, I mean, from my own experience and with the women that I talk to and going through a journey, because I'm 54, so I have a lot of women around me and friends who have actually stopped menstruating and menopause in their eyes. And I think the general conversation is that it's where you feel very hot flushes, you feel moody, you get headaches, you have this all happening and there's some irregularity. I know then when something happens in my body, I always, my husband will say, oh, you're getting menopause. So there is a bit of a kind of a myth I can feel about it. But really, to be honest, until we started talking about it, I didn't know much about it.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. And that's quite common too. I guess if I hadn't been a health practitioner and been working with women with this for so many years, I wouldn't know either. But just carrying on what we were discussing before, that the shifts in hormones and lots of other things can begin, a good 10 years or more before you actually have your last period.
Isn't that amazing? So what is the process sorry, I won't ask you now. What is the process that happens? Like, why is it 10 years before?
Well, it's not always 10 or so years before, but it can be. So a lot of women report to me in consultation and when events and so on, that they're starting to notice changes in their menstrual cycle, sometimes years before they actually stop having periods. And it might be in their late 30s, early 40s. And they might notice other changes too, like they might have more premenstrual signs and symptoms or more period pain, or they might start to feel different emotionally about things and start to want to go deeper within. So there's lots of things that tend to send up little flags that things are changing. And quite often, and that's why we're doing the Thrive Through Menopause online learning, because lots of women don't often connect the dots between things that might, signs and symptoms, and actually that premenopause to perimenopause changes. So we have a list of signs and symptoms to look for. So what sort of information did you gather as you were growing from young adulthood onwards about menopause? Did you hear stories from older women or?
Nothing. I mean, I literally had to speak to my sister to find out what having a period was. And it was funny because, just digressing slightly here, but I was interviewed for one of the, I think 2UE about that woman who recently ran a race, and she didn't know how to run it because she didn't want to wear a pad, she didn't want to wear a tampon, and so she just let it all happen. I don't know, did you hear about that?
No, I didn't hear about that.
So it became a bit of a global thing where it was really a flagship to say, what about the women who can't have access to, items of sanitary stuff to help people? But because she was just letting, she had blood running down her legs and everyone was a whole hoo-ha about it. And we talked about the taboo around periods, and I think that falls in the same category as menopause, because I didn't even know what it was. I had to speak. My mother said, talk to your sister. And then I really never even thought about menopause. It just was something that happened later. My mother said to me, I just asked her, and it was only like about 5 years ago. I said, "Oh, when did you get menopause?" She said, "Oh, not till I was about 70." And
Oh,
I know she was very late. I think she was 68 or 70. Yeah, she had it very late in life. So I was like, "Oh, wow. Oh, do you? Is that a good thing?" I was like, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. There is a part of me, I think, that has a fear around through my understanding that I like having a period because I know it's about elimination. So I always feel very healthy, and I know that I'm usually on the clock. And mine, when it comes earlier, I know it's because I've had too much estrogen or I've had a stress, so I need to release. So I get concerned about that when I don't have one, how am I going to release? And, that is a thing, because I know people put on weight sometimes, and yeah, they get grumpy. But I have also heard that my migraines may stop. So it's got a bit of a kind of all sorts in there.
okay. So I think you've made a very good point when you say it's a bit of a taboo subject, because even though there's been quite a bit of media attention to physical signs and symptoms like hot flushes, what I find with a lot of women is the emotional and psycho-spiritual and energy problems tend to bother a lot more women than most people understand. So I think by having taboos and not discussing stuff, it can often make things a lot worse for people, which is why, we speak with people like you to, raise awareness about it. But it's also to let other people in people's lives, such as the men in women's lives, know a bit more about it, because I've had lots of men ask me over the years about this. In fact, I've got an article for your site that I'll send you soon. That's
Great.
also on the course, but it's fairly important about this. So, and that leads me into your Mrs. V Society, because you're very passionate about informing people and providing tools for people to have changes personally and socially.
Yeah.
What sort of feedback have you had from the women and men that make up your community about women growing more mature and into their menopausal times?
Well, I mean, hence why I started Mrs. V Society, because I didn't feel that there was anything that spoke to the type of woman that was still vibrant and young at heart and kind of smart, and kind of just wasn't that, like, I've retired, I'm over now, and that kind of energy where I felt, God, that just doesn't resonate for me, because I still feel 20 on the inside, and I'm sure a lot of women do still feel 20, but it wasn't actually articulating itself online in any of the sites. So I started that, and then because I work in branding, for me, and branding I love, because it's actually all about a totem. It's a Native American, which is your totem is your essence and your spirituality and your strength and your protection. So when you understand about who you are and your values, then you draw on that power. So I love the branding. I see myself as a conduit between the hay house and the everyday person. That's kind of where I see it, because I think I want to bring this thinking and the spiritual side in a very practical tone. So I know that it's coming. Look, people are speaking about it now. It's much easier to talk on a spiritual level. I just did a very large event at the Langham where I had about 30 speakers, and had a very mixed corporate government audience, and really just diverse. We had women who from settlement services who were, had disability. I had refugees. I had women who'd been homeless. I had very wealthy people who were kind of. It was the most wonderful mix, and there was so much heart in the room. Like, it was very transformational, because for me, I hold the space for people to learn about information. I'm not here to judge, and it's just about to hear what comes out, and I facilitate on an energetic level, and that's what I see my role is. And I think just opening the conversation and saying, this is how we're all feeling. And that was the general thing. Like, one of the things I stood up and said, like, what about if you're at 1 o'clock in the morning and you're waking up, or you're lying there and you can't sleep because you feel incredibly anxious? I have that. I said, most women I know have that. You're not alone. And I think that's the thing of saying you're not alone with these issues. It's like the Me Too thing about the sexual harassment, is that once you voice that, I think exactly what you're saying is, what does it mean to be a woman? How does it impact women, you know, spiritually in their life? And how do you help without, you know, kind of deep diving too much? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because,
Yeah.
no, you can't. Like, I've just had a meeting with someone who's done a big and a very big Australian organisation, and they were very prescriptive in their telling their staff to how to behave. And it's not about that. I think it's allowing space to do it for people to discover what they innately know. So I think, as from my understanding, as we come into being over 40, that's exactly what we're doing. We're kind of allowing ourselves to have the confidence to speak. In the same way, the balance, you're also discovering your vulnerabilities. And then it's working out, how do you hold yourself in a space of being vulnerable and strong. So I think that's the learning that you come up, and you know, there is no answer, you know, and there is no end goal, pot of gold. It is totally, you know, it's very cliche, but it is about that journey and going, oh, okay, it's the ebbs and the waves. And it's the same as even that menopause thing, is the ebbs and waves, and the, you know, what does it mean for me emotionally if I'm feeling like this? Is it because of this, this, and this? Because I always like to figure out what's happening. I want to know what's happening so I can fix it. But sometimes it's about just allowing it, you know.
Yes, yes. Well, you certainly on your site and your blogs and so on discuss the dangers of ageism, and I see a lot of this when I'm working with women and men who are becoming more mature, and I have found that a lot of women don't want to think about the menopausal times because to them it represents they're getting older and that they're going to be treated differently. Have you noticed that with people, and that those two things are linked, even though some women have quite an early menopause, like in their early 40s, it's still linked with ageism, which is such a blight on our contemporary society. What do you find your feedback is with that link with ageism and menopause?
Definitely there's an ageism around it. It's like something's wrong with you because you can't have children. And that's a very old, almost in the 1700s, where you couldn't, because I was discussing about the whole taboo thing about you couldn't talk about your periods because if you didn't get them, it means you were barren. And then when this pill came in, if you got them, and it means if you couldn't talk about your periods because it meant that if you didn't have them, you were pregnant, you know, like there was all sorts of taboo stuff with it. So I think there is definitely, I mean, yes, the ageism stuff is really hard because I see it everywhere. And, but at the same time, I think as that conversation rises, there's also like the focus on it, there's the expose of it, people going, oh, that's not okay anymore. That's not okay. And I think just the talking about it is definitely a healing, but it's a long way to go yet.
It is a long way to go. Well, Scarlett, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And I think you've brought up some really good issues for women and men to think about, because men that I meet want to support the women in their lives through this time, and they also want to recognise their own midlife journey as well. So it's not just about women, but this program is for women, but it's also going to be read by men as well.
Look, and my thing is that I always talk about women rule the world. And the thing is that with all that responsibility, that power comes great responsibility. So that means that we are mothers and we have to teach our sons how to be with women. So yes. Therefore, you know, and most of my audience are women. I have, you know, I really actually aimed it towards women now, because in the end, really, if the women are okay, the men, that will happen. And I do believe that. My main thing is I talk about the different chakras and how to actually integrate all the different parts of life. So my message is very much around that you can't separate those parts. So if you have a really good relationship but your work's terrible, then that's not right. And so that's my thinking in the workshops, and all the information I'm putting forward is to really have an integrated, balanced life. So yeah, I mean, and yeah, so that's what I'm very strong about, and hence why I have a diverse range of experts and speakers.
Yeah, That's terrific. Yes, you do have a diverse range, and all of those things, it all comes up for examination when women start to experience the hormonal shifts. They find that inner shifts are happening as well. So that's why, of course, it's quite interesting that yours is also called The Shift.
I know, I do. So I have the event Shift, which we are running, by the way. It won't be till next year, but we're running in September. And but in the meantime, like yourself, I'm doing webinars, masterclass for members that'll run weekly and just build up a library and just talking to incredible women like yourself. We'll be doing one together on different subjects. So I invite any of your members or audience to have a look and sign up. You can be a monthly member, and I'm also doing a coaching group once a month where people have access to me like this on Zoom for an hour each month, the webinars, and also directory listings. So you can be one of my listing there and my promoted expert.
Oh, well, thank you. That'd be lovely. I look forward to that. I'm just telling our listeners now that you'll see Scarlett's website after this recording finishes, so you can have a look at Mrs. V Society, and there's a membership with that, and you'll see our website as well. So thank you so much, Scarlett. I look forward to more fun together.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Wendy.
Bye.
Yeah.